Russia's Black Dolphin prison houses some of the country's toughest, most violent criminals. Have you ever imagined a prison where even the worst criminals, from mass murderers to cannibals, would wish they got the death sentence instead? You're about to find out that it truly exists. We visit inside Russia's Owl prison, where hardened prisoners are stuck in small, freezing cells at below 50 degrees Celsius. Imagine having to live the rest of your life in an Arctic prison while wearing normal prison clothes, encircled by ice, even in the summer, and a 3-day trek from civilization. It is utterly terrifying and puzzling. It sounds like the worst punishment possible for any crime. This is just a hint of what truly happens in Russia's deadly prison. Polar Owl Prison. The polar owl, located on the banks of the So River in Komi, is a freezing and remote colony that houses over 1,000 hardened prisoners in Russia. Officially known as Penal Colony Number 18 of the Federal Penitentiary Service, this is one of the 7 supermax prisons in Russia, holding only terrifying prisoners who have been sentenced to life imprisonment. Polar Owl Prison is a one-way road for prisoners, as it is located in the north of Russia, where there is endless winter and permafrost, high on the Arctic Circle. One can only get to this prison by train from Moscow to the nearest train station, and this journey alone takes over 2 days. After that, they must still travel a few kilometers by bus before arriving at the freezing supermax. The prison was once a forced labor camp for inmates, but after that it became a special regime colony for the worst criminals. Prisoners in this place can appeal their sentence after spending 25 years there, but not surprisingly, no one has successfully left that prison. Even after death, many prisoners still remain at Polar Owl. Their family typically ignores them because of their terrible crimes, so there is a settlement graveyard near the prison with hundreds of graves for all the prisoners who could not survive this place, as their families never bothered to transport their bodies. The horrifying prison is a fear for any criminal who has been caught, as they always agree that going there is worse than a death sentence. Isolated from the world, this prison is known for its excessive cold, which causes some prisoners to drop dead when they can no longer take it. Temperatures drop below 50 degrees Celsius, which is so cold that even polar bears stay away from this region. Don't let the majestic statue of the large sculpted owl at the main entrance of this prison deceive you. This is one of the deadliest penitentiaries in the world, with some of the most horrible criminals, from serial killers and terrorists to rapists and any other offenders that you can think of. Nonetheless, these prisoners always hope to be sentenced to death rather than being sent to this unbearable, hellish place. Although the extremely low temperature is enough to make the strongest prisoners collapse to their deaths, that's not the only reason why it's so horrible to be sent here. Infamous prisoners at Polar Owl. To give you a bit of context about the kind of prisoners that end up in the Polar Owl prison, take a look at Alexander Pushkin, a Russian serial killer so prolific that he gained himself multiple nicknames like the Chessboard Killer, the Bitsa Park Maniac, and the Bitsamanasi Psycho. This terrifying man is known to have killed up to 60 people, and many of the victims' bodies were found at Bitsa Park in Moscow. In 2007, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. Before he was caught, he had the crazy idea that he wanted to kill enough people to fill every box on the chessboard. Even after he was caught, he was still cocky. Reporters asked him what he would do if released the next day. His answer? First thing, I'd kill 2 people and a woman. But this wasn't his disposition for long. Once he was sent to Polar Owl, he ended up in solitary confinement, suffering the intense cold and psychological torture that most prisoners experience. He then said that it was better for him to be dead than live there all his life. He's still alive, suffering for the crimes he had wickedly committed. If a horrible prisoner like this could be terrified of staying here, then there's no doubt that Polar Owl is the worst place any criminal could be sentenced to. Another horrible prisoner who ended up in Polar Owl is Hasha Kulayev, a terrorist from a gang that attacked a school in Beslan, resulting in 333 deaths, including children. His cell is so small that he can only stand or sleep sitting. There aren't enough cubic feet for even a child to lay down.
Or let's not talk about Yevhen Anatolievich, a serial killer nicknamed the Orphan of Solikamsk. He killed 6 people from December 20th, 2006 to January 2007 and was sentenced to prison life in Polar Owl. Life was so hard that by 2016 he had committed suicide and ended up in the graveyard beside the prison.
Penitentiary horrifying daily routine. The goal of the prison system at Polar Owl is to break the prisoners down psychologically, and judging from the number of deaths in that prison, it's been successful. In the prison, prisoners can be in single, double, or tiny cells like the one where Kulaev is being held. But even if the prisons have a bed, the inmates cannot lie down or sit until it's lights out. They remain standing for all the hours of the day from the moment they wake up. The mental torture of standing in one position every day for the rest of your life is already a lot, but remember that these criminals have done something even more horrible, which caused them to end up in the penal colony in the first place. If you look at the perspective of their victims, it completely serves them right. The inmates are allowed to go on a walk for about 90 minutes each day, but it's barely exercise. It's simply staying in another confined area with high concrete walls and an iron gate roof as the ceiling, so they can only see hints of the sky. Even if they looked up, they were still reminded of the doom that awaited them from now until death. All the inmates in Polar Owl are regularly tortured, and it's even worse when you consider that the temperatures are below 50 degrees centigrade. For instance, during their exercise, they're sometimes just forced to line up outside for up to 40 minutes. Their prison wear is light, barely enough to protect them from the cold. They can only stand completely still, even if it is meant to exercise. If a single person moves, the whole group is doused with a water cannon. Physical torture is not the only thing that these prisoners experience. There is also the mental torture of not having contact with the outside world or even talking to each other. They stop them from forming bonds or gangs like you see in American prisons. Even though there are hundreds of prisoners there, they don't even talk to each other. All prisoners are stuck in the cells, except it's time for a 90-minute exercise in the cold. There are no cafeterias either, and most of the rooms are single cells. Those in double cells have one roommate, but end up in big trouble if they are caught communicating with each other. The first 10 years of a prison sentence in Polar Owl mean that the inmates don't get any visitors and cannot make any phone calls. After the 10-year period, these criminals are allowed to see their family members once a year. Most of their family members don't think seeing them at any time is worth it. Due to this, they are completely cut off from the world, only seeing the prisoners and guards every day. Based on all these, you can see that life in the Polar Owl prison is horrible for all the inmates. They have the same daily routines with physical torture, mental torment, poor medical care, and the same food to eat each day. The guards choose which radio programs and movies they can watch once a week. The lives of the inmates are completely structured, so they do the same thing each day. No successful escapes. With how secure the Polar Owl prison is, it's not surprising that there isn't a record of a successful escape attempt. Even if they escape, there is no place to go, since this Arctic colony is
A 3-day journey from the whole world. It would become a race to see what would kill them first, the intense cold in this isolated wilderness, or the guards and dogs that would spare nothing to hunt them down. In the intense freezing conditions, the Polar Owl prison has cells enclosed in 3 iron doors. 5 layers of iron fences are built around the colony, and the guards are armed with heavy and violent Caucasian shepherd dogs ready to jump into action when they command. No one can escape from this prison, but that doesn't mean they don't try. One inmate, Alexander Illustratov, was nicknamed the Bloody Taxi Driver. This Russian robber and serial killer brutally murdered 6 of his passengers between 2005 and 2007. He was convicted in 2008 and sent to the Polar Owl colony to serve life imprisonment, but it seems like he thought he could escape.
3 years after his imprisonment, he was doing his daily walk with the guards when he tried to escape from the prison. He used a small iron to hold the door open and ran away. Then he climbed the fence, and when he jumped down, he landed in danger. The hungry dogs were already waiting for him, eager to tear him apart. The guards had to command the dogs to stop attacking him. Despite that, he was gravely injured and locked up in a single cell. A few months later, he died, and no one ever tried to do that again. The prison management even added new iron fences for security, so no prisoner could escape the polar hour. Those who end up there either live out their days suffering in the freezing cold while facing psychological and physical hardships, or they commit suicide because they cannot take life in prison anymore. Polar Wolf Prison. Karp is known as a prison town and houses the Polar Owl Prison, but that's not where it ends. This freezing area also houses Colony Number 3, also known as the Polar Wolf Prison. Polar Wolf and Polar Owl are twin hellish prisons, and the former has a wolf statue at the entrance. There are over 1,000 prisoners locked up in the Polar Wolf Prison. The prison was built by Gulag prisoners during the Stalin era and is known to be one of the worst options among the prisons in the Russian federal penitentiary system. Most prisoners have to deal with unbearable colds, horrible food, and constant beatings. The freezing nights are the worst part of being locked up in this place. Even if the prison is below 50 degrees Celsius, it does not have central heating. Some prison cells have no radiators. It only looks like they do because they are painted on the wall. Inmates in the Polar Wolf Prison might end up in their punishment cells, which you might know as solitary confinement. There are about 24 solitary confinement cells where people are locked up with no access to the outside world. Just like Polar Owl, there's a lot of psychological torture that happens in Polar Wolf. One prisoner even said it had a system devised to break the human spirit by making survival depend on total and unconditional obedience to the will of guards. Most of the prisoners there were always anxious and paranoid. They were also encouraged to tell on each other, which meant no one could trust themselves or have meaningful social interactions.
There was always the fear that they would get into trouble with the guards. At least with Polar Wolf, those who enter the prison still emerge. The prisoners are also not as horrible as those locked in Polar Owl, but they still experience the same level of torture. One of the notable prisoners is Plon Lebedev, who served 8 years at the Polar Wolf Prison. He was charged with tax evasion, money laundering, and embezzlement. Some other prisoners are also against Putin. One inmate who was jailed there for 5 years said as soon as you cross the threshold, they let you know that you are in purgatory, where you have no rights and there is no one to complain to. The guards constantly remind the inmates of who is in charge, of electric shocks and beatings. Even in the minus 50 degrees Celsius environment, prisoners can end up naked or in wet clothes in their cell. The worst form of torture is when they are locked in a fetal position in an iron box, leaving them hardly able to breathe. What do you think about this prison? Do you believe that these hardened prisoners deserve this treatment after the crimes that they have committed? Well, there are some prisons that are even worse in Russia and hold terrifying criminals. Butyrka Prison. If you think that the Polar Owl Prison is completely unbearable and is worse than the death penalty, some prisons are even worse, located in Russia, and can cause the worst criminals to go out of their minds. Butyrka is a prison in Tverskoy district in central Moscow, Russia. It is the largest prison in Moscow and was known for holding political prisoners during the Soviet Union. The prison was founded in the 18th century and is one of the oldest in Russia. The building was constructed during the reign of Catherine the Great in 1879. When you peek into this prison facility, you are likely to find terrorists, revolutionaries, political opponents, and terrorists. It holds all kinds of prisoners, from anarchists and traitors to children and serial killers. There are also spree killers, mob bosses, rapists, and more locked up in this prison. If you're looking at the climate, Butyrka is an extremely hot prison.
The temperatures in central Moscow get extremely hot during the summer. So while the inmates in the Polar Owl prison are suffering from the extreme cold, those at Butyrka are dealing with unbearable heat that makes them vulnerable. Imagine that, with the unbearable heat, the prison is dealing with overcrowding, with over 2,000 people locked up in the facility. In each cell, there can be over 100 people locked up. Meanwhile, these cells were built for 10 people alone. This makes Butyrka prison even worse than the Polar Owl, since there is overcrowding. You can imagine these cells are filthy and unsanitary. This also leads to a lot of diseases. Many of the prisoners here end up dying due to diseases, especially tuberculosis and AIDS. The prisoners are so many that even in the vans they are congested, and the healthy ones are mixed with the sick ones. They end up being exposed to tuberculosis even before they enter the cells. Many of the prisoners that end up in Butyrka are drug dealers or addicts, and they find ways to sneak their hard drugs inside by bribing the guards. This also means that there's a
scarcity. So many inmates share needles. Imagine 100 inmates in a cell sharing a single needle. Disgusting acts like this end up spreading AIDS really fast among the inmates. Aside from tuberculosis and AIDS, many other inmates in Butyrka always develop different kinds of diseases, hardly ever leaving them alive. There are some rumors that the prison guards and managers intentionally spread these diseases to punish these lifers. After all, they all committed heinous crimes, like rebelling against the government, killing people, and causing chaos, like with Polar Owl. Those who tried to escape from the Butyrka prison are met with ruthless punishments, and don't feel sorry for them, because they also did horrible things. There's the story of 3 prisoners, Boris, Vladimir, and Anatoly. Anatoly was sentenced to life in prison because he killed a car owner to steal his car. He also killed the man's daughters and an elderly man. Meanwhile, Vladimir was a thief who tried to rob an apartment and met a married couple inside. He hacked the couple to death with an axe and stole their valuables. Then there was Boris, who argued with a colleague, so he broke into the man's house and stabbed his mother and daughter. The 3 of them had been in prison before and were sentenced to life. One day, while exercising, they found a small hole. They realized that they could escape, so using their bare hands, they dug and dug for days, and even bought a map from one of the prison guards for $1,000. They managed to escape, but Vladimir and Anatoly were caught 3 weeks later. Meanwhile, Boris was caught a year later because he tried to rob a store. They ended up in prison for the rest of their lives. White Swan Prison, another supermax prison in Russia, is the White Swan, home to mass murderers, mafia bosses, serial killers, piles, spree killers, arsonists, and more. Officially known as Penal Colony, known to the White Swan, prison is located in Perm Krai and houses criminals sentenced to life. When it opened in 1938, it was a penal colony for political offenders, but by 1999, it had become a permanent base for lifers. Ever since it opened, no inmate has ever been released. Unlike the Butyrka, which is overcrowded, White Swan has a large capacity, and only 1/3 of its space has been occupied by inmates. That doesn't mean that the prison is friendly to these scary criminals. Do you know where the name White Swan came from? The white part was derived from the bright white color of the prison. Meanwhile, the swan part was derived from the guards' method of moving the inmates from place to place at White Swan. At White Swan, all inmates must lean forward with their hands behind their backs like a swan when being moved across the prison. In this uncomfortable position, these inmates are handcuffed and unable to attack the guards or make any ruckus. White Swan ensures that all their prisoners are completely removed from the rest of the world. Unlike other prisons in Russia, this supermax stops all forms of communication. They cannot watch TV, listen to the radio, or even receive visitors. All they see are their fellow inmates and the strict guards for the rest of their lives. You might wonder if this is a humane way to punish these inmates after they enter this facility, but if you look at the types of offenses they committed, you will see that being cut off from the world is a small price to pay. For instance, the prison is now housing Dmitry Vinogradov, who was a lawyer who became a mass murderer because a coworker jilted him. He's the perpetrator of the 2012 Moscow shooting, where 6 people were killed. He will live the rest of his life in White Swan. Another horrible criminal is Dmitry Karimov, also called the concrete products maniac. From 2005 to 2006, he AR'd 10 women and killed 7 of them. Not to mention Gennady Sisipov, a Ministry of Internal Affairs major. When his son committed murder, Sarah Benifov decided that the best way to save him was to kill all the witnesses. He even killed his son's wife. These criminals are now spending the rest of their days in White Swan, where they cannot even walk with their eyes forward. The situation at White Swan is so psychologically tense that the facility has an in-house psychologist. The doctor assesses the inmates to pair roommates that won't drive each other crazy. They also attend to the inmates who have eventually broken down due to mental stress. This shows that the prison management knows they have created a terrifying place for these inmates. At least the prisoners can walk for an hour each day and bathe for 10 minutes once a week. They also have a library and a commissary, which is more than you can say for other prisons in Russia. Black Dolphin Prison. Let's take a look at Black Dolphin Prison, the best place to break the most hardened criminal and make them beg for forgiveness. But once you get there, it's too late to turn back. Black Dolphin, officially called Penal Colony No. 6 of the Federal Penitentiary Service, is the oldest prison in Russia. It's called Black Dolphin because of the statue of the Black Dolphin located at the main entrance. At first, Black Dolphin was a prison for those sentenced to life of hard labor. Now it's housing some of the worst criminals in Russia, including cannibals. That's right, Black Dolphin has child molesters, murderers, serial killers, terrorists, and cannibals, all of whom are serving life in prison. One of these is Kakish Karunbayov, also known as the evil Gagrinsky Ripper. He's a serial killer, rapist, necrophile, and cannibal. Black Dolphin barely allows its many criminals like this one to breathe. They are isolated in cells, each secured with 3 steel doors. Every day, they have 90 minutes to exercise in a large cage. During that time, the guards search their rooms for illegal items. From waking up to sleeping, inmates cannot sit or rest in their bunks. The guards make rounds every 15 minutes to ensure they are all standing. But it gets even worse. The prisoners eat the same thing each day. They're fed soup 4 times a day. It's no wonder there are no cases of escapes or even attempted escapes, as these killers are broken in body and spirit from the first day they arrive at Black Dolphin. This way, they cannot plan escapes. What's more, they are always bent over at the waist, and the guard holds their handcuffed hands behind the back. In this kind of situation, the prisoner can never attack the guards. Once a prisoner steps into the 4 walls of this terrifying prison, they already know that it's their final destination. What do you think? These Russian prisons, do you think the inmates deserve these inhumane conditions? Let us know your thoughts. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos we have made, click on one on the screen or look at the channel. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Amazing discoveries. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Share this video with friends and join the discussion on what these findings could mean. Your thoughts and questions are important, so let's explore incredible mysteries together.